Beverley Manley, welcome to Profile.
My pleasure.
We're really, really delighted to have you. I'm really, really delighted to have you, and I know that I speak for the crew overall as we are celebrating Jamaica 60, and I'm calling this part of my Jamaica 60 special, and I don't even have a title for you. You have so many different kinds of titles. So author, mother, feminist, advocate, as a politician as well, and we're going to be exploring some of those different sides of you in this interview. But when you look back at all of those different kinds of, are you surprised? How do you feel?
Well, I'm overwhelmed. I think that's the first feeling that I have, that I have been able to sort of experience all of those. But I'm not a linear thinker, I'm more of an integrative thinker, so that I find a way to collapse all of them so that I am who I am, who is somebody who has been granted a number of experiences to be where I am. And I'm grateful, by the way, for all of the experiences, not just some of them.
So, and that, you know, is good experiences and bad experiences.
I don't label them.
You don't label them at all?
I used to, but I don't label them anymore because it's just a label.
Okay.
You know, you have an experience, you have an experience. When you're going through the experience, it can be traumatic, but guess what? You find out that it was all part of who you are becoming, not who we are becoming, we are becoming. So I avoid labels.
So let's start out how that story started. We started in Rollington Town.
Rollington Town, and I think the street was actually called Rollington Road or Rollington Street, and we lived at the corner of Fernandez Avenue and Rollington Street or Rollington Road. So that area now, to our right we had neighbors, in front of us we had neighbors, and to our left we had what we call a Chinese shop. Madame shop. And Fernandez Avenue is actually the terminus for the bus. So there's a lot of stuff going on around us. But my mother, one of her main roles was as the main protector of her three girls, because my brother came 7 years after my younger sister. And she just wanted to be sure that she protected us. And she was very clear. I sometimes wonder how she was so clear about all the other things that could happen to us. So we're kept mainly in the house. We weren't brought up in a wider family.
Yes.
You know, we'd see family every now and then, but it was not the kind of family that I'm experiencing now in my adult life.
You've described your mother, you've said right there, as a protector.
Yes.
She was very, very strict by your
Very
description.
strict, very disciplined, very much in keeping with the disciplined mothers of that age. Because remember, I'm 80. 80, okay. And so I was growing up in the what?
In the
I was born in
1940s.
40s and 50s. And so, but she was very strict. I mean, she knew about things like values. And although she didn't actually go to church, she was very clear about what the spiritual values were. So she was clear, for example, that we had to be honest. We couldn't, because if you lied, it meant that you would also steal.
And these were things she was saying to you as well?
She was saying to me.
All of you?
All of us. You can't lie, because if you lie, it doesn't stop there. It means you're going to steal. And then all these things you grow up with in Jamaica. Every something is for a good. Every disappointment is for a good.
Yes.
And she'd sometimes create a disappointment.
She would create a disappointment?
She would create. We'd get dressed, for example, because on very few occasions, but she would be taking us somewhere, like to Hope Gardens. And when we're ready to go, she'd say, take your clothes off. And you can't complain, that's a disappointment.
Why would she say take your clothes off?
Because she wants you to know what disappointment is.
She created a lesson.
She said, get dressed to go to Hope Gardens.
Okay.
And then when we are ready now to leave, she say, take your clothes off, we're not going. And then, of course, you couldn't understand that. And she'd explain that she wanted us to know what disappointment looks and feels like.
She had that discussion with you as children.
So that when we get it in life, we'd know what it was. That's the kind of mother she was. And she wasn't afraid of the strap. Now, my father was the opposite. Very quiet. He was a railway station master. And the other thing is I learned about race and color in my own family, because my mother was high brown with what they used to call good hair. Mm-hmm. You know that one? Her family were proud that they could sit on their hair. We'd often hear that story. My father was like black, and he was a deacon in the Anglican church, so he grew up in the Anglican church. So from him, we got a lot of the Anglican side of things. So we also grew up in the Anglican church. But when we were really young now, we used to go to Galilee Gospel Hall, which was in the community. But as we grew older, we got confirmed in the Anglican church. We're members of the Anglican Young People's Association. That was Daddy. And once a week, he would sometimes preach in the Anglican church.
So she was really the force. He was strict in his own way. Because you've said as well that in terms of power, your parents taught you about power in a.
And I never discovered that, until I was doing a second master's degree at American University, and we were asked to write something, as an adult now, about power. And I said, but wait, I've never thought of Daddy as being powerful in that relationship. But it must have taken enormous power for him to sit back and watch my mother perform. Because, sometimes things got a little out of hand, but he never said anything. I can't remember ever having a cross word from Daddy. Certainly no strap or anything like that. Very quiet, but having said all that, typical Jamaican man. Wine, women, and songs.
And the children were, as children, you were aware of this?
We know because he would come home late at night, and every night it was the same quarrel. My mother would attack him, and he would say nothing, that kind of thing. So we grew up hearing her voice, because life was rough. She was quarreling a lot at the time. She
worked very, very hard as well, you said.
Boy, I'm telling you, 24 hours a day, because, let me give you an example. When Daddy was transferred to Old Harbour, we used to have to leave on the train to come to St. Hugh's, which is where I went to high school. And I would say we had to wake up like at 5 for her to get us ready and pack lunches and so on. And then she was always making those coconut cookies, the red and white ones, and she would give them to us in little packages to sell at school. We were very embarrassed by this, by the way, because by then St. Hugh's had many different social classes. But you had like the upper class there as well, and we had to sell these things that she would know if we didn't sell them because we didn't bring the money back. But that was part of how she was able to keep us in school. But it's interesting that she worked, so I could see her right now slaving over the pot for the coconut cake, to make the coconut cakes, right? And she saved money by being almost every profession in the family. So if something went wrong with your shoes, or that was Daddy's shoes, or she knew how to fix it.
Yes.
They had a thing in those days where you could turn the collar of the shirts of the men. When one side got worn, you turned the collar so the worn side didn't show. She was a fantastic dressmaker, fantastic cook. So we learned she always had chickens or something in the yard. She grew vegetables. She had birds. It's like where we lived was like a community in itself. And of course, we grew up in rent houses. Sometimes, depending on what we could afford, they would rent 2 rooms. Sometimes we were lucky to get a little house. But my mother, she was something else. She was something else. Very courageous.
What was that relationship between you and her like?
Oh, we never had a relationship. We did not have a good relationship, if I'm to put a label on it. We just, if she said, I said, I don't know what it was. And my sisters would beg me, Beverly, just keep quiet. Because then she got incensed and it would become worse. But that was like, I would say that relationship, even when I was the only one in Jamaica taking care of her as she grew, I don't realize to my age, or a little older in her 80s, that I began to realize that I had really judged her unfairly. And out of that experience, I learned about judgment and how awful it is to judge anybody. Because by then I would have felt what it is like being judged, being a public person.
A completely public person at a particular era in Jamaica. And I want to move on to that, but we have to take the break. As I said, the kind of conversation that we were expecting. My guest is Beverley Manley, and we are back on Profile right after these messages. Stick around.